thank you all for logging on tonight. It sounds like it's raining in a lot of parts of Colorado. It's actually raining here too. We haven't had rain in months, so it's like surreal and very apropos, I think, to tonight's little program. I'm a garden designer based outside of Grand Junction. I'm in Fruita, Colorado, but I work wherever, anywhere, done public and private projects from Colorado and beyond. But I have been in love with natives and dry plants for a super long time. I remember when it wasn't cool and it was harder back then. Um, but these are good days. These are good days for water conservation gardens and all the good things we're going to talk about. Yeah, here we go. I actually want to start with a poll because I just want to have a feel for who I'm talking to and what you guys are interested in. Since I don't have the pleasure of having you straight in front of me. So Phoebe's going to ask everybody, are you like I'm asking really about your motivations tonight. Like, are you more interested in saving water in your landscape or collecting plants? And there's sort of a reason. It's just the first question on there. I guess yeah, just the first question. Don't worry about the second one. Um,
Yeah, sorry about that,
like
Kenton.
that's
I guess
okay.
it
Yeah,
was.
and I know you might have an interest in both, but like if you have to pick one, if there's, one if it's 51% versus 49% in your mind, in your heart, I'm curious where you're at in terms of that. Are you interested in cool plants? Are you a plant collector, or are you trying to save water and have a front yard that's rational to take care of? That's kind of what I need your feedback on even before I start. Um, so light that up if you would. I guess while Phoebe's sort of tallying it. Oh, bang, instant. Cool, cool. So it looks like about 70-30. What a clean number. We love clean numbers. Saving water and time, most folks, 70%. It looks like a little less than half, 30% are interested in collecting cool plants. Well, wonderful. You're right at the right at the sort of gateway drug state of your landscaping loves, I think, because one begets the other. I also see a lot of folks are interested actually more in the pollinator and natural garden. Well, lucky me, then this is going to work. Um, thank you guys for giving me a little feedback on that. So now I know my audience a little bit better. Um, so. I ask that those things are not mutually exclusive, right? These things overlap quite nicely and they blend into each other, but I really believe in us having sort of an anchor in our purpose and mission with whatever we're planting in our yards to just help us guide and direct our decisions so we can be more successful. Um, like, I guess, we can get more done if we have a baseline, a sort of reference of what we're working from. And if our flag is firmly planted in the pollinator world, then, I have a message for you. And if your flag is firmly planted in the saving water world or the collecting plants world, I want to address kind of all of those purposes for having a yard and a landscape. And like I said, they're not exclusive. They do overlap. I literally have a Venn diagram in this talk just to show how overlappy it can get. But I think it really does help us when it comes to the vast world of selecting plants for our yards. I think that anchor is really helpful. I mean, I use it professionally all of the time. Like it is my job every day. So that's sort of my ulterior motive with tonight's uh, plant fanfare program is to kind of slip the message of using mission or purpose to help us decide which plants we're putting in our gardens. Because I think without those guideposts and without those trail markers, it just kind of struggles if we put like a wet loving plant in a dry garden, or we have a plant that really just doesn't have a lot of ecological services in the middle of a pollinator garden. And that's easily done and it's innocent and we all do it and it's not the end of the world, but I really would love us all to have the best landscape and front yard, backyard that we can. Um, this front yard here is I'm using it as an example because it has each of those things going on in it. There is a rock garden in the middle. It's a classic rock garden, and it is about collecting plants, and it's got rocks in it. And it's like archetypical. Not all rock gardens are about rocks. They're really about plant collections. They tend to be small plants. It is also the whole front yard. We can identify it as a xeriscape because there's no irrigation in it. Those downspouts you see coming off the roof are the irrigation system. Um, so it is definitely a xeriscape, the whole dang thing. We can call it that. Um, but there is a part of it which is xeric. It's a xeriscape, but not really a rock garden. On the right side, you'll notice there's wood chips there. I just want to say up front that like this evening's talk will be more focusing on plants that like to grow in gravel and rocky um, situations, and not those that grow in wood chips, because there's a great number of amazing, um, awesome plants that are perfectly happy in wood chips, maybe even prefer it. Um, but they'll at least like, there's sort of an ethos associated with that, I guess, or there is shrubs and trees, and these kinds of plants are where we're usually going to use wood chips. And so I just wanted to point out like that distinction right now. As a general rule, plants that come from drier places with leaner soils, like where we're mulching with gravel and rocks, and plants that are from slightly lusher places or that drop their own leaves and cast their own shade, those are the plants where it's more appropriate to use wood chips. And that's kind of why we're not going to talk too much about wood chips tonight. But good news for you, because 70% of you are looking at saving water. The shrubs are definitely the most available group of plants that you can just go out and buy today that are water conserving. It is the easiest thing to have a shrub garden that doesn't need any water whatsoever. Actually, shrubs are like the easiest tools, the most available tools for us, and that's awesome. So like on the right side of this picture, we got sand sage, Mormon tea, mountain mahogany, and yuccas. Those are all, and there's a Apache plume off the edge there. Those are all relatively easily available now. Like this is good news for the time of life we're in right now, is that native shrubs are way, way available, and I love that. So good news on that, and it's wood chips, and that's not what we're going to focus on tonight. But I do want to like throw the little bit of the last bit of um, thought out there about wood chips versus gravel. That in a wood chip world, it is appropriate where there's leaves dropping. The trees and shrubs are dropping leaves, where the soil slowly amending and getting richer is appropriate. It's kind of where we're approximating like little forests and trees and shrubby places in nature. Like that's where wood chips work. And when we plant into it, we usually don't want the wood chips touching the plants because it can rot them as a general practice. Um, because then on the other side, left side of the screen, the gravel world, gravel doesn't rot plants, so it can touch them and it can hug them, and the plants can enjoy the benefits of the mulch, which holds water in the soil, keeps the soil cooler, lets rain percolate better. Gravel's an amazing mulch. It's a very, very powerful water conservation tool. And when it gets thicker, it's an amazing weed prevention tool. So gravel is wonderful that way. And virtually all plants are fine with gravel. Um, but when we start planting desert plants, like classic stuff like cactus, they don't like wood chips. There is actually a group of plants that dislikes wood chips. So um, that's another reason and an advantage that we're talking about gravel landscapes, xeriscapes, and rock gardens tonight. Is that gravel is a powerful tool. There's a reason you see that as the mulch in a lot of Front Range, Colorado, and xeric places. I guess that wasn't the last word I was going to shout out to you. Like a shrub garden, and this is save for one or two plants in this picture, is probably the lowest maintenance thing you can have. It could be the lowest water and the lowest maintenance way of covering ground. And I think it's a legitimate thing we need to talk about. Like shrub garden is a really, almost no one uses that term, but it's real. There's a new book out there by a couple guys that work at Denver Botanic Gardens that sort of celebrate it in a sort of wacky punk way. Just saying like, don't forget the shrubs. Pollinators are cool. They love flowers, but don't forget shrubs. Shrubs are really important. And I do want to give, shrubs a shout out for being the lowest maintenance um, way to cover land, if that's what you're looking for, just to cover the dirt. There's so much beauty in flowers and things that can feed the birds and feed the bugs, all of that. Shrubs are not to be overlooked. They fill space. And you know, they're obviously bigger in scale, so you got to work with that. That is actually the last we'll say about that. Because tonight we're talking a little bit more about xeriscapes. And in some kind of garden design circles, we use the term gravel garden, where it's more about the plants. It just happens to be that gravel is the appropriate mulch. Kendrick Lake is a park planting project many of you might be familiar with in Denver. Who knows? Some of you might live off of Jewel Street and live around the corner from this, but it is a perfect example of what a gravel-based xeriscape looks like that has some rocks as sort of an aesthetic element, but they're not necessarily required to grow the plants. They're just embracing that Western look and giving some permanence and something that's there all winter. Cool. That's what the rocks are for there. I'd say that's pretty classic xeriscape, like xeric garden. And I think also something that's this densely planted is what we should be shooting for in Colorado, because the xeriscape look where it's mostly gravel and like 2 or 3 plants is appropriate in Tucson, where that amount of heat and rain is what uh, supports that level of sparse vegetation, I might say. Whereas in Denver, as you guys know, when you go hiking and your wild places like Green Mountain, say, that's like front to back grass, right? That literally every square inch of soil is covered in most of those plant communities. So when we think xeriscape, we need to be thinking lots of plants, actually. Let's not make our xeriscapes too much of the desert, because there's only a few corners of Colorado, like where I live, that were actually desert, and that's what the world, that's what the soil wants of it, is to be a desert with big spaces between plants. Um, uh, yeah, enough on that. And many of our gardens are sort of a mix and sort of a blend like this. This was my apartment that I lived in way many years ago, and it was unwatered. Actually, it's still unwatered, and I love driving by because these plants are still there. They're still alive. It's the beauty of plants that are that dry growing. I'm going to use the term xeric. It's a Greek-based English word that I'm pulling on you, but xeric just means dry or dry loving. And so like these are obviously xeric plants because I need to go get a current photo. This was a couple years ago, but the point is these are all plants that have been unirrigated at a nasty little apartment in downtown Grand Junction, and they're doing fine. They are still there. Some of those plants are getting much bigger now. So it is a xeriscape, but it's also a rock garden because we got small plants. We've got small rocks there. Um, it goes on. So the first suite of plants I want to talk about is some of my favorite ones. I love this format because it can be very selfish. I get to talk about some of my favorite things tonight. But my favorite plants are ones that have performed really well for me, that just they do the dishes, they pay the rent. They're really good plants, and good stuff. Like, the opening slide for xeric plants is an agave. And while we don't have agaves in Colorado, there are plenty of agaves from our nearby states that take the winter fine. There's many great people who sell them, who sell the winter hardy agaves. This agave prairie variety, Kuzii, is actually native around Flagstaff. There's a ski mountain on, just north of Flagstaff. Like Flagstaff's freaking cold. It's Ponderosa territory, you know? This is a good plant for that. It's some of the biggest agaves I see in Denver, and the oldest ones are this variety. Um, Gosh, I love an agave. They're also so sexy. They have enough structure. You could use them as a Christmas tree. Why not? Folks in Santa Fe just are a little more aware that they're in a dry place. And so, I think dry gardening's been going on there a little longer. It's reflected in their architecture even. They're like, yeah, we're in a dry place. Of course, our houses are made of mud. Adobe's a normal thing. It's just, old growth culture down there, human and otherwise. And so they've been embracing agaves for a long time. And they're also really closer to where agaves are native. We love agaves. They're good. Um, they're, like a slow growing sculpture, and many of them, once they're 10, 20, 30 years old, they bloom themselves to death, which I don't see that as a disadvantage. I just see that as like a really metal lifestyle. You're going to bloom yourself to death. The good news is they usually leave some pups, we call them, some little baby plants. But they appreciate a gravel situation and they like to grow dry. They also don't mind being watered a little bit, so they're a wonderfully adaptable investment we can make in our dry gardens. To the point, though, I was telling you about how in Denver we shouldn't think of, or the Front Range generally, we shouldn't think of it as a desert, because literally the agaves that we grow in Colorado in our gardens are not from the desert. They're from the steppe, technically. This is a grassland. That is a desert grassland. That is a steppe. Like that's actually not the desert at all. There's just way too much grass happening there. That's what, 40% of the soil is covered in plants. Most of it's grass. You got a couple cactus in there and then agaves. These are where our tough agaves come from, is they come from the prairie. You know, that place where frenetic, crazy, schizophrenic, mercurial weather happens. Like, oh, tornadoes, blizzards. Like, I know Denver. I lived there. Like, luckily that's where this particular species comes from. So actually my favorite, and I think the surest bet in Colorado is the New Mexico agave, because it actually comes from the prairie. So it sees that like Wizard of Oz kind of weather. You know, it's a good plant for that. Um, that's why it is one of my favorites. It's a reliable one. Bringing it a little closer home to me, the claret cup cactus are a good example because they are native. We have them here in Colorado. My local form that grows around the Grand Valley here actually doesn't have spines, which is kind of fun. So if you don't like cactus because of the spines, you're not alone. I'm one of you. Like I don't, yeah, there's not every day do you want something completely covered in spines. Um, and so this is nice. This is a nice baby's first cactus, is to grow cactus that don't have, you know, you know, uh, visual harassment all over the plants. So I love the spineless claret cup. It's a cutie. It's a slow growing thing, and it's from over here. And in Denver, it actually does better if it's not irrigated much because it could actually rot. It's from a place that only gets 10 inches of precip, and Denver gets anywhere from 12, 18, 20, depending on where you're at. So it really prefers to be dry. It loves a rock garden. It tends to grow in rocky, like rocks, true rocky places, but it's also great in gravel in Denver. Good plant. And no, you're not going to have it. Your most naysaying neighbors, they're not going to walk by and look at this and be like, no, that's ugly. Not going to happen. I love it for its people appeal, this one. And also red. Red is not common in cactus. It's not like the top color. So I do love a good red. There's a lot of related ones. The Echinocereus genus has a lot of variety. You've got native ones with little fragrant green flowers growing around you on the Front Range. But this guy, Rickenbachii, which, oh, forgive me, I forget its common name. Lace spine cactus, maybe. This one actually likes summer rains because it came from places with summer rains. These flowers are huge. You can't hold the whole flower in one hand, and they're super fragrant. Again, that nosy neighbor that judges everything you do, not gonna give you guff for this plant. How can you hate a plant that's flowers are so big you can't even see the body of the plant, right? I love these guys. They're also very long-lived and slow growing, so they're small. You can collect them all if you want. I do love them. Side note, there are prickly pears, which are probably even easier and cheaper to procure, that don't have spines. Plus side, they don't have spines, so like they're not like aggressive looking. The downside is if you have rabbits and the rabbits get desperate, they're more apt to eat the spineless cactus. So just go into it with a warning there. But prickly pears bloom beautifully. All of them have some gorgeous flower that puts a tulip to shame and lasts longer than a tulip. So hello, like I love tulips too. Don't get me wrong. I used to collect them, but if you're just looking for flower power, like why tulips when cactus, right? Some of the prickly pears don't even look like prickly pears. Like the potato cactus is a prickly pear who is just so wonky and fun and small, and he's highly adaptable, this little guy. They come with pink flowers or yellow flowers, but most folks just appreciate them while they're just pads. And you can grow this plant from just one of those little balls and jam it on the surface of the soil, and you will have a new plant. Love an easy plant too, don't get me wrong. Um, so this is an example of an unwatered garden in Grand Junction. And you'll see this giant prickly pear here. That one hasn't always been hardy in Denver. It's this big thing, whatever. But because your eyes are you're stolen, The show is being stolen by that penstemon down there. If you guys garden, I'm sure many of you are familiar with penstemons already. There's a bajillion kinds. They are native from New York to California. We've got like 275 species in the US, and then there's all these garden hybrids out there, which is good news and bad news. Good news is there's variety. Bad news is that means there's a lot of them from wet places. Yes, I said New York. Like I have seen the native penstemon planted in medians in New York. Um, like it's there are ones that are not xeric, that are not dry growing. So I just want to warn you with that. There are plenty of them that are sold that are beautiful in a pot that end up making pretty flowers and are pretty rugged plants, but they're not dry growing. So that's why I'm not going to include those ones. But my favorite of the dry growing ones is the superbus down here. And it's built into the Latin name. It is the superb penstemon. It tends to live longer and bloom more the drier you grow it. I'm not kidding you. It is a really, really cool plant. A friend of mine who lives in, is he kind of like Centennial Littleton area? Just sent me pictures of his front yard, and he's got Palmer's penstemon, which is another dry, big one, and Superbus growing together back to back. And it's just the prettiest dang thing you've ever seen. If you don't like gaudy colors, this plant is not for you. It is like horrendously gaudy. It's like causing traffic accidents kind of color. And that is the reason I love it. It's a good one if you haven't gotten enough of it. You want to get really nerdy with me, look at the subtle differences in colors between those different plants. I wasn't sure that was going to grow in Colorado at first because I got my original plant in Phoenix, of all places. And it's been the best plant ever. I love Penstemon superbus. Loves gravel, hates wood chips, prefers not to be watered. I kid you not. Obviously, we water them to get them started, but once they're established, hands off is the way for this plant. It's a wonderful thing. Moving closer to home to most of you guys in natives, a little closer than Phoenix, is this dotted gay feather. It's if any of you know gay feathers and what's the other name for them? Blazing Star is the other name. There's a lot of them throughout the US, from Florida to Denver, but this is the one in Denver. And dotted gay feather is awesome. This little humble plant only grows a foot or two tall and lasts forever. Like these plants can live decades, decades and decades, and they tend to bloom in the summer, the hottest time of the year when other plants are going to bed. And they're really important for pollinators as well. It's the only gay feather dash blazing star that I've grown in Colorado and has done really well even without irrigation. It does great. And even for me, and it's drier over here than where it's native, and it still grows and blooms even if we don't have any summer rain. I don't know how it does it. It pays the rent even when it's not getting paid. I don't know how it does it. It's magic. It's also, this is why I want to talk about it. When you go to buy it, it's ugly in a pot. It always looks terrible in a pot. When you mail order it, you're going to get this pot and it's going to have like three strappy ribbons coming out of it. And you'll be like, wow, that is this the value for my money? That's just the way Liatris roll. They're ugly in a pot because they are deep-rooted permanent plants that want to be in the ground. And they'll never look beautiful in a pot. Um, but they are probably one of the best plants you could have in your landscape because they'll literally outlive us. You know, I love that. I love a plant that can humble us. There are some really, really old Liatris. Um, love the plant, and butterflies really like it as well. A friend of mine first turned me on to them, and she's like, "I guarantee you, you will get monarchs." And I was like, "Ah, Sarah, I haven't seen a lot of monarchs in my neighborhood." Dang it, like clockwork, had monarchs after I planted Liatris. So it's a good plant. It's a really good plant. Another one who has a similar vibe going on for it, sometimes looks ugly in a pot, but really pays the rent, is the prairie zinnia. This is native to the shortgrass prairie. I think the nearest you'd find it in nature is like La Junta, Colorado, maybe. That's the nearest place that I saw it. It is a short zinnia. It's a perennial instead of your classic, garden cut flower variety. This native zinnia is a short guy and it makes a carpet and it does spread over time. So like if you don't like plants that spread by roots and just get bigger and bigger, then don't plant this one because it is trying to be generous to you. It starts blooming here fairly soon, I'm feeling, what is it, June? It starts blooming towards the end of June at least, and doesn't quit until November or it snows. And it does it when we even have a drought. Again, I don't know how this plant does it, but that's probably why it is one of my favorite xeric plants because it can do so much. It's not at every single garden center. You've got to look for it a little bit, but it's the reason for these reasons, when I see it for sale, I buy them up and just take them because I know I'm going to need to use them. It is super. I feel like it's the perennial dry plants answer to a petunia bed. Because when we plant annuals, we just want constant color and flowers. That's what we're going for. This thing can do that, and it can do it without irrigation. It just performs a little better with some sun. Loves Zinnia grandiflora. If you don't grow it, don't deprive yourself anymore. And I realized just before the talk tonight that I had forgotten this lovely little baby here, the Engelmann daisy, but I was reminded because I'm looking out my front door and they're cranking now. This is another plant that blooms most of the summer. It's just kind of a nice airy dome about 2 feet tall, 2 or 3 feet tall. Engelmann daisy is another native to the shortgrass prairie, and it just blooms and blooms and blooms. And I am remiss, and I apologize for not having it on the handout associated with this class tonight, because it's a good one. It is a very good one, and I do find this one much more available now. I'm glad to see it in a lot of garden centers. If your local garden centers don't have it, bug them till they do. We'll talk about plant availability later. Love an Engelmann daisy, and it must be said too, plants that are constantly blooming, they're not just entertaining you. When they're in constant bloom, that means that they're always available for pollinators. And some pollinators are only active in certain times of year. And so it ensures that, say, there's like a 2 week window that some freaky fly is doing its thing, it's going to have a pollinator in that narrow 2 week window, or it's going to have flowers in that window if you've got something that's blooming all the time. So there's something to be said for generous, generalist, heavy blooming plants. And I told you I wasn't going to talk a whole lot about shrubs or bigger plants, but I was lying a little bit because I wanted to plug this guy whom I believe might be one of the most useful xeriscape plants of all time that we forget to use. It's called little bear grass or greens bear grass or woodland bear grass for some reason, and it's not a grass. It's actually in the yucca family. It's a woody lily. That doesn't matter. The point is it's evergreen, which is cool. Also lives forever. It can live for decades, maybe even a century. Very cool. While it has pretty homely flowers, believe it or not, you might not have noticed that this photo has got some flowers in it. There's just like this like heap of popcorn in the plant. The flowers are not a lot. Little pollinators find them really important. Those little tiny little foamy flowers will be covered in tiny little buzzing things. So the flowers are not the reason we grow it. The reason we grow it is that its permanence and its adaptability and being evergreen. It is that lime-colored green in the middle of winter. So as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of a great replacement for all the junipers that we've overplanted. I think there's a place for junipers, but obviously I'm sure as many of you would agree that like we just put too many of them around. They get too big for a lot of spaces. And another reason I like this one is it's not pokey like a yucca. There's nothing spiny on it. In fact, it has those cute little tassels which dance on the wind and catch the light instead of having spines. How cool is that? It also will grow in a garden that gets watered, and it will grow in a garden that doesn't get watered, and it will grow in sun or shade. I'm just starting to see it more available in nurseries. I saw some in some commercial plantings in Denver recently, so I'm really glad it's just becoming available. But it is the cat's meow. It's not showy, but dang it if it isn't humble and a hard worker. It is a good structure plant. I just love it, and I use it along sidewalks and paths a lot, where it's not going to poke people, where yuccas are always planted and they are going to poke people. So anyway, I can't talk enough about that. That might be one of my favorite plants of all time because it's so, so useful. It's a good one. If you can't find it locally, you can certainly mail order it. It's available out there. Um, and moving on to something that is also kind of a shrub, but is also a flower, is the Mojave sage. These guys often perform in a drier garden better than they would in a wet garden. Like I said, it's both a shrub and a flower. It looks kind of like a sagebrush. It's a sage, cool. It's got blue silver leaves. That's all fine. and then it does this, and then it blooms, and you can have flowers anywhere from pink to purple and blues, and has this crazy potent fragrance. That's a good one, and I do find it performs better in a drier situation. So if you haven't grown Mojave sage, give it a grow. That's a wonderful one. It's incredibly zingy smell, keeps the deer and rabbit way off of it. If you have ever seen a deer or rabbit eat it, I would love to know because I've never seen it happen. It's got a strong flavor. Um, that was sort of like xeric plants, things that, I go to, or they might be my go-to plants for things that grow dry and perform no matter what. It's a hot, dry summer. They're going to be fine. They're gonna bloom. They big, small, whatever. That's xeric plants, right? Shifting intentions a little bit here. I want to talk about rock garden plants, but before we get into rock garden plants, I want to talk about like what is a rock garden, and it's actually a wonderfully ambiguous term. The ambiguity is a strength and a weakness at the same time. I think we can sort of lose that anchor of like, what's the purpose of what I'm doing if we don't have a definition, but I also think it frees us up to play and experiment and blend into other things and have all kinds of different purposes. And that's very true of rock gardening, because like I said, I've seen rock gardens that don't have rocks. Rock gardens tend to be about the plants. They tend to be about small plants. They tend to be about wildflowers. They're not necessarily about dryness or saving water, although almost all rock gardens still consume less water than, say, turf. A rock garden is like a feature. It's a thing we don't mind investing money in, buying expensive rocks, buying exotic plants. The plants don't necessarily have to be native in a rock garden. They tend to be like it's a collectorship thing. Like it's a like it used to be baseball cards. Like that was the classic American thing to collect. But if you're not that person, you know someone like that who likes to collect things, who likes to have one of them all, collect them all. And there's a whole culture of rock gardening out there who is big time collect them all. Some of us are interested in the rocks. And my friend Chris Dixon up in Canada, he proves that a rock garden doesn't have to be a big expensive thing. He is a master of making these tiny little rock gardens with not so exotic flowers. Those are hens and chicks in tiny little bonsai pots full of slate. But he makes these beautiful things, just showing that a rock garden can be about the aesthetics and the rocks and not necessarily about growing rare plants. So he just shows that there's all these different edges of rock gardening. He's one of them. There is a long-standing culture of rock gardening that probably goes back at least 100 years. And it is plant collectorship. It is plant exploration. It's nerdy, it's botanical. There are books on rock gardening. There are societies in, most of the major countries on Earth. There's a rock garden society. This magazine on the left is the one from England, but there's clubs that are all rock garden clubs. Denver actually has one of the biggest rock garden clubs around the world, based in Denver, which is very cool. But I just wanted to let you know that like rock gardening is a culture and it's a subset. It's a genre, if you will. Just think like from the music world, whether it's country or punk, like there's a genre, and rock gardening is a developed genre with a developed group of people. And I got to confess, I am one of those people. I am a rock gardener. I'm deep in that world. I've spent a lot of time, even my professional and fun life, building rock gardens, including crevice gardens, which are like they're a kind of rock garden. We'll just put it that way. They're a special kind of rock garden that tend to be all about growing cool plants, but not necessarily always. And that took me around the world. I've had a bunch of fun with that. And even wrote a book with my friend here. Like crevice gardening is almost its own world too. Within this, it's like a subgenre of the genre of rock gardening. So be warned. If you do deep dives on things, oof, there's a long rabbit hole you're going to get lost in with rock gardening and crevice gardens. But I was thinking how I wanted to sort of talk about where. Well, actually, let me pose it this way that um, I have seen with someone who's new to xeriscapes, dry gardening, landscaping, and all that, someone who's new to it, conflating it with rock gardening. Like they're not the same thing, but they definitely have an overlap. They definitely feed each other. They definitely enrich each other. So I just had to make a Venn diagram, had to get very nerdy. But Maybe I'll give you a second to read it because there's nothing like reading something while someone's shouting in your ear. If I were to distill them, I'd say that rock gardens are about collecting plants, no matter where they're from and no matter how difficult they are to grow, and you're happy to water them and pamper them. It's collectorship. It's going nuts. And a xeriscape is very much about saving water and plugging into your local spirit of space and growing plants that want to be there in your yard. And they're not exclusive. Obviously, they have things that are different from each other. You know, you could have a very watered and wet rock garden. And so that obviously makes it not a crevice garden, or I'm sorry, not a xeric garden. But in the middle, we do have a big fat overlap, which is having colorful small plants, and they tend to want to be in gravel and with lean soil where we're not adding compost or anything. We're just making sure that it doesn't get too wet or it doesn't actually have, you know, we might even ensure that it doesn't get fertilized and doesn't have compost in it. And there's two, I tried to distill it with an ethos too. Are you willing to go to great lengths down there on the bottom left to grow any plant, the special plant, the cool plant that was hard to get? You're a rock gardener. Or this is a dry landscape, like adapt or die, baby. That's where I think the two ethoses sort of separate from each other there. Which yeah, I wanted to put that forward before I start talking about rock garden plants because you know where rock garden plants might differ from a xeriscape is um that um um these plants are coming from different places. Hold on a second. Um uh so Yeah, so like our xeric plants, they're going to come from this steppe environment on the lower left or the desert environment on the lower right, because those are dry places. That's cool. Those are xeriscape plants. But plants from the upper two, the mountains and the seaside, those are wet places, often cool places. They're not necessarily xeric places. They're not necessarily dry and they're not necessarily hot as we have them. So I think that's where I really want this is the message I wanted to impart to all of you. And I forget this all the time. I'm sticking the wrong plants in the wrong places, or kind of losing sight of my original goal. But like the plant origins can really make that distinction of like what is a xeric plant and what is a rock garden plant, where they overlap and where they don't, is where those plants come from. And I think to be brutally honest, I think a lot of plants are sold with tags that don't give us like a really great idea where it came from. Like I think there's a lot of plants that were marketed as xeric or dry growing, like red hot pokers. Like, I love a red hot poker. There's nothing xeric about those. They love water. But they were xeric plants in Portland, right? And so they got this reputation for being dry growing. Well, dry in Portland is different than dry in Colorado. So the point is there's some overlap, but they're also different at the same time. And you know, this is a good example where this is prickly thrift. There's a bunch of them. They're cool. They're rock garden plants. Those spiny leaves keep the rabbits right off of them. And they're mostly from well, they're all from Eurasia. They're from dry places overseas. So they're not native, but they are well adapted to Denver. They do great in Colorado. They're a really good plant. Um, and there's something you can collect. There's many species, different shapes of them. Um, Another classic rock garden plant I want to share is draba. There's a lot of varieties of draba. There's local ones and foreign ones. There's desert and mountain ones. Draba is really easy to grow from seed. It's in the lettuce family. Is that right? Yeah, the mustard family. And those cute little, they're almost always yellow. Some are white, but most of them grow into these cute little balls, and they're often the first thing to bloom in rock gardens. But drabas are like a classic rock garden plant. And like I said, some of them are from the desert. We have a native annual one in the desert here. Probably not a great garden plant. But most of them that we grow are from the alpine, which gets like an afternoon thunderstorm every day. So they're not necessarily a xeric plant. They do like a little bit of water in our gardens, but I think they're worth growing and they're beautiful. And when they're the first thing to bloom, those first pollinators that come out in the spring are really going to like them. Another one that like hosts is blooming all the time, so it's good for pollinators, is this little scuttle area or skull caps. The skull caps are from around the world. This one is from Asia as well. I like it because it just reblooms and reblooms, and it's only like 2 or 3 inches tall. You can get ones that have pinkish and reddish, and we have some native blue ones that are cool from like Kansas in there. Skull caps are really cool. That's a great little rock garden plant. We really like the small ones because they fit well and we can collect a bunch of them when they're small. But this one's has a place in my heart because of the reblooming thing. Like if I have to travel for work, I hate it when I come home and find out that something's bloomed and I never got to see it. And that's never a problem with this plant. I sort of want to wrap up the sort of rock garden plant section with one of my favorite plant genera called Zauschneria. It is a mouthful. Some people call it hummingbird trumpet or a California fuchsia because it's got a fuchsia-shaped flower. And to be more frustrating, botanically and scientifically, Zauschneria has now been changed to epilobium, which is all very annoying. I just want to grow the plant and find it. I just want to be in love with it. Stop changing its name. Um, Zauschnerias have a very long bloom time. They tend to start somewhere in mid to late summer and just keep going. And frankly and selfishly, I just love orange. So they're one of my favorite plants. And obviously the hummingbirds love them. They crank out these orange tubular flowers, which just produce lots of nectar for the hummingbirds. Everett's Choice is a little bit more of a thirsty one, and it's a miniature one, but I think it's one of the deepest colored ones. So, shout out to Everett's Choice if you like a small, compact thing and you're watering your rock garden and you're growing mountain plants or alpine plants that like water. But some of those Zauschnerias are much more dry growing. And I have found by and large the Zauschnerias do need more, they need some water. Most people's xeriscape and dry gardens, they are irrigating a little bit, and that allows them to grow a great variety of things. So that's not a big change for most people. I know that I'm extreme in that some of the gardens I'm putting in and landscapes are no water, like no irrigation. And the summation of that is Zauschneria has not performed for me unirrigated for the most part in Colorado. Rarely does it want to go that dry. Just a little bit of water, though, will give you these incredible flowers. My favorite one is actually a Californian variety I didn't think would overwinter here, but it does great and is probably the darkest color one with these silver leaves, which are super cool. The variety that's on the market that's really common is called orange carpet, and you can buy that dang near anywhere. It's fine. What most people don't like about it is it sort of spreads and it's really flat on the ground. It's a funny shape, but it's good because it was the first Zauschneria we could buy in Colorado, which is cool. So Zauschnerias, if you like hummingbirds, if you like orange, if you're a freak like me who just loves the color orange, that's Zauschnerias are for you. Get them. Luckily, more and more of them are suddenly becoming available. These used to be hard. Like I used to have to mail order them from California or buy them when I was in Oregon. Now we can get them, so it's awesome. Good time to be alive is what I'm trying to say. And Zauschneria also is a really good transition to talk about habitat. I was heartened to see because I was trying to slip a little bit more habitat talk in this evening. I was heartened to see how many of you are interested in gardening for other beings who are alive. It's a lot of fun. One of my mentors said, when you start learning the names of the bugs in your garden, you double your pleasure. I think that's a wonderful quote, and I think he's right because now I'm a big fan of these jumping spiders. They're super friendly. They can't bite you. They're actually the only spider I've ever met that when you look at them, they look back at you. It's been shown that this little spider is just one of the most intelligent little creatures. They have a memory so they can ambush prey. They can go around an obstacle and get something. Anyway, really smart little critter. It's hard to ignore and disengage with something like that, like someone who's dressed so cool and actually has a memory and who can actually look up at you and knows where your eyes are. Like, think about that. That is not a dumb animal with 8 legs. That's pretty cool. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys that. You wouldn't be into pollinators and these things if you hadn't already fallen in love with some little critter outside. So I want to talk about habitat plants, and these will tend to be rock garden or xeric plants, but they're great crossover plants. They are ones that they're performing a service. I suppose that's a way I should have put it earlier that when we're planting, what anchors our intention with a garden is the sort of service of the garden. In a xeriscape, it's saving us time, it's saving us water, and for some of us, water is getting frickin' expensive here. Um, and for rock gardeners, we're happy to water it because it's giving us the service of really cool plants that do neat things. And that's where habitat gardening also would make a good Venn diagram with those things because you could have a dry habitat garden, or if you want to be providing food and habitat to critters, maybe you water your habitat garden a lot in the summer because it's a buffet, right? Maybe it makes it worth it for you then to be watering like that because that water has a purpose. It's not just maintaining a green, clean, safe lawn. It's actually feeding something and doing something good and maybe has a little bit deeper meaning. And I don't even mean to like deride lawns. There's a place for lawn. That I think it does an emotional thing for us. Um, but obviously now in the States we are questioning like, wow, we do have a lot of lawn. We have really treated ourselves to these ugly green rugs everywhere. Like, and again, don't get me wrong, there's a place for a rug. I have a small lawn for our dog, and there's a place for it. But I don't have to tell you, we've obviously overused that. We've become real one-trick ponies when it comes to covering the ground, and that's why you guys are listening tonight, is we're all talking about more interesting things to do. Because when you start attracting animals like I think that's a hair streak butterfly. That moth down there that looks like a butterfly flies in the daytime. It's called a police car moth. I love that. It's so wacky. I also include this picture because in traditional habitat gardening, they say that a mulch can interrupt ground nesting bees. And every rule is out there to be broken because there's this big ground nesting bee who just was not stopped by that gravel. She made a house in there anyway. Um, yeah, I think it really is true when we start gardening for habitat, it doubles your pleasure because surprising cool things happening. And it's true. Plant it and they will come. I love all the cool things I've seen in my garden as a result of planting plants. And it was an accident. Like I'll admit, I think I started as a plant collector, just a nerd who liked weird plants. I can't even gesture in my own home without running into a freaking plant because I can't have enough of them. So I was a plant collector, rock gardener. And then I found xeric gardening because I was like, ooh, purpose, saving water, awesome. Because I live next to the Colorado River and I'm watching it dry up. So then I became a xeriscape person. And then, when I started planting things outdoors that are native, attracting all these plants, then I'm like, oh wow, animals are cool too, right? And then I found um, things like this eriogonum. This is the oval leaf buckwheat. It is a dry growing plant. It kind of hates being irrigated. It's not always available, but you will find all kinds of bugs on this plant. You will find beetles, moths, flies, everything. It kind of stinks like an outhouse. Luckily, you can't smell it from a distance, but I think that's why it has all these weird bugs on it, and is that it attracts them that way. Buckwheats are a great group of plants if you like pollinators because they're equal opportunity pollinator attractors. The common favorite is Canna Creek buckwheat. Um, I hate to say it and I have to say it, it's not a super xeric buckwheat because it's from the mountains. It wants a little cooler, a little wetter. So a little bit of water lets you grow Canna Creek buckwheat, and then you will see some wacky pollinators. Everybody goes to this bar. Canna Creek is a great food source for pollinators. A classic is the Agastakis. I also think they're not terrifically xeric. They grow in places where they get summer moisture or deep moisture, but a little bit of water makes them bloom, and you have great hummingbird food in them. And the leaves also smell good too, so that's cool. Agastakis are great. Um, I think we often tend to think of habitat gardens as sort of prairies. And that's probably because the habitat gardening movement really kind of started in the Midwest, where prairie is what's the native ecotone there. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that because not all of, say, Colorado looks like that. Often the xeriscape in the rock garden is like the long last habitat we didn't have in our towns, like snakes and lizards and things like the rocks. And these plants that are native to us, they like, these hot situations. So, where we're gardening doesn't look like the tall grass prairie exactly, but I was also telling you it doesn't exactly look like the desert either, right? Um, Anyway, the nice thing is in Colorado, we get to decide what the vibe of our habitat garden looks like because Colorado's everything from mountain peaks to prairie. We can have it all. We've even got a little bit of desert here, so we can have anything we want. And this is one of the plants that'll grow in a garden, any kind of garden. The sunshine daisy I plant it because it repeat blooms even in a gravel garden with no water. I love this little plant. And it's also small and clean. So it is a rock garden plant, it is a xeriscape plant and a habitat or a pollinator plant because it's in constant bloom and it's a daisy. Daisies tend to produce a lot of pollen. It is all three. It is a perfect crossover plant. There are several different varieties available out there, and virtually all of them are good. So get one. There's botanical differences, like can you tell the difference between these two species? I forget myself, so who cares? Whatever. There's different varieties. Get yourself some sunshine daisy, whatever its last name is. Another one in that category, who's also in the daisy family, is this amber wheels blanket flower. I'm sure many of you have blanket flower already, but my complaint about blanket flowers is a lot of the commercial ones are not quite as xeric, not quite as dry growing, and most of them are very short-lived, only living about 3 years. And if they don't reseed, then it's gone. And that's too bad. This one is a favorite of mine because it is actually a Colorado selection. It's from the mountains here in Colorado. It has bigger flowers than most blanket flowers, and it's long-lived. The Amber Wheels variety, you may have to mail order or look out for it, but it actually spreads a little bit underground, and that makes it long-lived, which, as you know, I don't know. I'm approaching 40. I can see 40 from here, and as I get older, having short-lived plants, like I don't have time for that stuff. Like I need plants that are still going to be here when I'm an old man. So I want to plant plants that are going to be around then. Um, yeah, that's why I like amber wheels. Just a professional garden designer's pro tip. Get amber wheels if you don't want to have to replant your gaillardia. Um, that sort of wraps up purely sort of habitat crossover plants I wanted to talk about. But this gives me at the time sort of nearing the end of this little plant journey. Now that we've talked a little bit more about plants within um, those types of gardens, like a xeriscape, saving water, pollinator, natural garden, because you like critters, or a rock garden. I am curious among you guys if you had to pick one right now, or what you're most excited about right now, or you're developing right now in your yard. Um, do me the favor and let me know. I'm curious which one of those three, if you have the three options and you had to pick one, um, which you would be going for. We'll give you a few minutes and a little break from my voice while you choose. Hopefully you guys had enough time. Looks like Phoebe's gonna wrap it up. Not a whole bunch of change there. We had a slight more in folks who answered the first question, 1% more folks wanting to save water. That's cool. And maybe if my memory holds, it looks like we have an even more larger interest in pollinator natural garden. Like I feel like I don't sometimes forget like what my goal is or what my original intention is until I really just ask myself. But I even have a checklist on my designs like that reminds me like, wait, what's the purpose of this garden? Oh yeah, right. Okay, let's not shove all the plants in the world in there. Like let's stick to an intention here. So good on you. Thank you for that. I'm glad you're into pollinators and habitat gardens. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Just wrapping this up here. Um, because there are more crossover plants. Um, I am now finally seeing this plant sold in garden centers. It's only an inch or two tall. It is so native, most of you could probably drive 0 minutes to an hour and find this native where you are. This is Hooker's Easter Daisy, Townsendia hookeri. I apologize, the Latin name didn't make it onto that slide. It is native to the Front Range. We also have it over here in the mountains, but it's a short thing that can bloom as early as February. And it's a perfect rock garden plant because it's tiny. Kenton likes it because it's the longest lived rock garden plant or longest lived Townsendia. And many of these tiny Townsendia daisies don't live too long. So I love that as a rock garden plant. Again, a daisy, quick, botany lesson here. If you didn't know, a daisy is actually not one flower. When you're looking at that, round thing there, in the middle are the actual flowers. The white petals are not actually true petals. They call them rays. There's actually a whole bunch of flowers. There's dozens of flowers on each one of those heads, as it were. So a daisy is more bang for your buck. Like there's literally dozens of flowers in every flower, and therefore it's a great um, pollinator feeder. Um, Good habitat plant, good plant, xeric growing. Straying a little bit out back towards this kind of rock garden, kind of xeric are ice plants. I want to talk about them because no one wants to talk about them. They're sold as xeric, and I think that's half true because they need a little bit of water to do what they do, and they perform a lot. They bloom and bloom and bloom. The ice plants are really beautiful. You can get almost any color of them, and they're quick growing, and that's fun. And actually things that do pollinate them, there's fewer pollinators for these, maybe because they're not native, but it's okay. Don't feel guilty for planting a plant that you like. But they're just not quite as xeric. So I have to say, like, I don't have those in my dry rock garden. I have them in my watered rock garden because I love me a good Delosperma. And I'm also creating habitat for me. Uh, one of the main animals in my garden is Kenton with a cup of coffee in the morning, walking around enjoying his garden before he goes to work. And this animal, this great ape, loves Adelosperma. It's my guilty pleasure, and I have no apologies about it. So it's that's where it sits on that spectrum. Um, there's another one that I'm really in love with, which is completely a guilty pleasure, but because Resource Central asked me to say favorite rock garden plants, I get to talk about it and kind of wrap up with it. This group of plants doesn't even have a good Latin name because they're a promiscuous mix of several genera and species. We tend to call them Aloinopsis hybrids or hardy living stones. They're actually available through a lot of mail orders now. They're another African thing. They're related to ice plants, but they stay smaller, and I find they live longer. They don't bloom as long, but their flower colors are wacky and cool, and there are striped ones and there's multicolored ones. I really love the multicolor ones. That's something that's super fun about them. And the more they're being grown in gardens, the more adapted to Colorado they are. I have trialed them in unwatered gardens over here, and they're doing fine, which is really cool. You could have a gravel garden xeriscape full of these things in Denver and not even have to water them. They're really fun. I'm going to list a couple of sources of these at the end, but yeah, Alenopsis hybrids like that. That is a guilty pleasure for me. I love them. Their main pollinator seems to be hoverflies, and only the nerdiest of us will know what those are. So if you like hoverflies, plant these. They're just a fun little plant, and they're small, so you can have hundreds. We have a small backyard, and I have hundreds, and I love that about it because I'm never bored back there. Um, but wrapping up with just a few more like native little ones. It's a cactus. It's native to the Western US and it's xeric and it's good for habitat is the snowball cactus. These are slow, tiny, incredibly hardy cactus that take -20, -30 degrees fine. It's one of the coolest little cactus you could ever grow. And many of them, their spines face inward, so they're not going to poke you. And most of them top out at about the size of a baseball. So if you're not growing a snowball cactus, you're not enjoying life enough. Um, just wanted to like give an example of a garden. It's a crossover of all three. In Arvada, maybe some of you have played pickleball here at the Sim Street Center in Arvada. It was my first public project as a garden designer, and it's a big crevice garden that is dry. And as an accident, it has become great habitat for things. It's a real amalgam of plants from all over the world. We've got Texas, Colorado, and Bavaria, and Texas again, and Patagonia, all in that picture. all of those places on Earth are represented by plants. And so it's like this smorgasbord of wacky plants. But I think I learned a lot from it. I learned what all we could grow in a big rock garden situation. And it's a big old crossover. And back then I wasn't as much into habitat gardening, but I really learned by the interesting creatures which visit that garden, which appreciate the rocky place and the dry plants that maybe don't care for trees and lawns so much. And you know, it allows us these guilty pleasures of this Balkan plant. It's from the Mediterranean, but like, how many plants do you know that are that color blue? That's why people are crevice gardeners, and we like to grow challenging plants, even though it's native. Paintbrush is really hard to grow. Sadly, there isn't time tonight to talk about how to grow them, but it's possible. They like to be dry. They need to be drier. Um, Yeah, that sort of wraps up sort of some of my favorite plants. But I definitely wanted to end with a slide that gave you sources because this is a time right now when there isn't just one or two big nurseries you can go to that have all of the xeric or rock garden plants. Right now, it's not a one-stop shop situation. It's a dozens of small growers are the source now. So like there's just lots and lots of little sources now. So it quite frankly it just takes a little longer to fill up your xeriscape. But we're lucky to have like Gardens in a Box program to help us, you know, at least get a bunch, get a good start, you know, good um, fat juicy beginning to our plant collection going on there. But uh, top of the list is the High Plains Environmental Center. They're in oh, they're not Loveland. Is that where they're at? I forget. Around near Fort Collins, one of the smaller towns up there. They're growing a lot of native and xeric plants. They go to sales, and I think they have their own sales. And I understand now they're listing their plants online, which I didn't realize. High Plains Environmental's growing a lot of great stuff. There's a couple of small stalwart nurseries following those that we've had for many years. And a mail order, quite frankly, is always going to be more expensive, but it's how you get the cool plants, stuff that you cannot buy locally. Um, that's the pro and con to mail order is that yes, it costs more, but with mail order plants, that's how we get things that you're just not going to buy here necessarily in Colorado. And another thing I want to note is that there's a lot of native plant clubs that have plant swaps, or just garden clubs that have swaps, where there are free plants, and there are plant clubs, and there are botanic gardens that have annual plant sales. And those are some of the richest resources for some of the more exotic plants that you can't just get at a garden center these days. So there's that. And the bottom three are more rock garden oriented. So they'll be foreign or wet loving plants. Anyway, with that, I appreciate your guys' attention. And I think we're going to move to questions now. Um, and for as long as Phoebe and I can tolerate staying up to our bedtime or whenever the Zoom subscription runs out. So you're the boss on that, Phoebe. You can cut it off when you want.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think we're good for like 15 minutes or so. That,
Cool.
or as long as there's questions, you know?
Yeah, I'm down to talk questions for a while. I learn
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
from it. So, yep.
Cool. Um, there were a couple that I thought were good. A couple of people had questions about like wanting to do rock gardens in semi-shaded areas.
Oh.
Um, Curious your thoughts on that. Is that possible? Are there some varieties we should look?
Great question. Yeah, that's a great question. So in shaded areas, uh, generally, just generally, it'll be a little lower variety and a little lower flower power that you'll see in a shaded rock garden. If that shade comes from trees, then there's some root competition and falling leaves that we have to look out for. Maybe water a little bit more and keep the leaves off of a rock garden as a general rule. Leaves and rock garden plants don't get along.
Uh,
But that's not strictly true. Then there's this little subset of things like coral bells, heuchera, as they're
yeah.
called, are natural rock garden shade plants. They are from natural rock gardens in the foothills of Colorado. So there are plants that actually go to that place. You will be limited. You have to be more intentional. I feel like my publisher would tell me this is an opportunity to plug the book. There, I believe we had a plant list. I hope it made it to the book of shade plants for rock gardens. If not, you could probably find one.
Yeah,
You'll definitely open up your suite of plants you can grow by watering more in a shady place. If that shade isn't cast by a tree, your variety is a little bit better, and it might actually be a good spot. Like north of a building can be awesome for alpines.
for
Grow
sure.
really cool alpines. So a bit of nuance there, what the shade's from, but
For,
yeah, it's not impossible to do it, even though it's not standard to
for
do
sure.
shady rock
Yeah.
art. Mhm.
Yeah, trees generally, yeah, create other issues, especially with xeriscaping. That's something that actually Grand Junction is talking a lot about. And I feel like the xeriscaping community is starting to talk a lot about of like, cool, there's all these turf removal programs. And like
What
there's
about the
their
trees? It's one of
plants.
our,
Like,
yeah,
let's not,
you're right. It
forget
is
about
one
our
of, I think,
trees.
the single biggest challenges to turf conversions out there. I think we've got some work to do to address it.
Yeah, we do.
Honestly, we need to get more information out there, don't we? We'll
We
work on it.
do. Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. So I know that's a big topic that our organization's talking about and other people are talking about. So
Those,
Kelly, thank you for that question and that call out.
that's
Uh,
actually another reason I like that bear grass. If they have the space for the bear grass, because it's like 4 feet wide or so, great shade plant. That's why I use it so heavily in my practice, is that
oh,
I've used tons of it in turf conversions under trees. Like yuccas and especially that bear grass is good. There are plenty of bigger plants that go under trees, okay, but small plants it gets a little harder.
cool. I'm just gonna throw those couple in the chat in case people
Thank you.
want those names to look at. Um, Someone was asking about wildfire problems.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I have
Yeah.
a quick
Yeah.
note, just that we have a seminar, I think in August 13th, if I'm remembering correctly, about sort of they call it defensible space, so that 5 to 6 feet around your house.
Hmm.
So if you're interested in that, check that one out. But yeah, do you have any thoughts about rock garden specifically
Yeah.
and
Oh,
wildfire?
yeah, for sure. There is overlap there. And an important nuance there. Oh yeah, there's so much more fire design and landscaping. In fact, I have to confess, there's a job I'm working on right now. I just screwed up and made a mistake where I had wood chips going right up to a wooden deck going to a wooden historic house. Like that's a no-no in firescaping.
Yeah.
So if they're interested, Idaho Firewise and Cal Fire. So
Mhm.
Idaho and California are way ahead of us. Not to mention like Australia and South Africa have tons of stuff about fire safe gardening. Um, but as a general, like rock gardens and xeriscapes are great because the mulch is gravel. Crevice gardens are great because the plants are small and inflammable. An irrigated turf is an acceptable, defensible space. But if you're not doing turf against the foundation of your house, cool. I think xeriscape is a great solution, but we're going to leave out grasses and we're going to leave out flammable shrubs. So all the conifers got to stay away from the house, things that catch leaves. I really like to use, again, the bear grass because he's so good, keep the leaves from falling leaves from sticking in the bear grass. But spineless cactus I like because they don't hold on to tree leaves. So
Mm,
spineless cactus, succulents, crevice gardens, gravel are all ways of having some life in that defensible space. Because
yeah.
a lot of people's complaint is like, oh, 6 feet of gravel around a house, it's kind of barren. And with a small property, like that 6 feet could eat up a lot of your space. So go for succulents, non-flammable things, not conifers and not smelly plants. Things have strong oils in them. So no sagebrush, no pinyon. It was like I opine at the risk of overstepping my expertise here that some of those big residential fires in Denver on the Front Range, it was Austrian pines that were between every house, just like making a horrible ladder fuel which just
Mm,
like lit everything on fire. So yeah, got to keep conifers away from our houses.
for sure. Yeah. Um, a couple of people are talking about maintenance in the chat or in the Q&A, about like deadheading and how many of the plants you're like basically maintenance of the plants that you've been talking about in rock garden. What's your
Nice.
experience with?
That is a great nuance. I really rely on questions for
Mhm.
finding things that I left out. So as a general rule, like rock garden plants are smaller, so maintenance is smaller, and some of those cushion plants, there's no deadheading because there's no stem that the flower made. So crevice and rock gardens are low or small maintenance, even if it's skilled. I like that it's a handful of trimmings rather than a wheelbarrow, so that's cool. I do find like a lot of us like get into rock gardening as we get older because it gives us this like intellectual stimulation, but it's easier on your body because it's just so much smaller, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. In a xeriscape situation, like maintenance, um, as a general rule, a thicker mulch is going to reduce your weeds, and less water is going to reduce overgrowth and weeds.
Mhm.
And uh, as a real general rule, the more flowery a plant, the more you might have to deadhead it, and deadheading is optional. Hardcore habitat people are not cutting back and deadheading because they're leaving the stems to let bugs live in them, etc. I am shocked by the percentage of my clients that didn't cut down their meadows this spring, who were cool with standing dead stuff, and having the new growth come through that. But as a general rule, like herbaceous plants, things that die to the ground every year, those are higher maintenance or once a year maintenance because we have to clean up the dead material. Really, maintenance often comes down to like the unavoidable maintenance is cleaning up dead material. So if maintenance is a big deal for you, just look at plants in terms of what they produce for that. So like
Yeah.
evergreens and shrubs are the lowest maintenance we can go to, and super flowery things like ornamental grasses and whatnot are going to be higher maintenance because they make all this material that has to be cut down in the
Right.
spring or cut down in the fall to avoid fire. So I hope
Yeah.
that helps a little bit with someone
Yeah.
thinking.
I guess the two other topics that feel like they've been chatted about in the Q&A is sort of pests or rabbit, turkey, wild turkeys, squirrels eating some of these plants. And
Um,
the other one is just soil preparation. I know you talked about like lean soils. Um,
yeah,
yeah, just briefly kind of what that might mean in terms of soil preparation or not,
yeah.
for rock or sorry, yeah, rock gardening or gravel gardening.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for kind of distilling those groups of
Yeah.
questions. So soil prep, um, sort of general thing about soil prep for dry and xeriscape, and this is an international thing. I see this was like there are xeriscape people in Chile, in Spain, in France. There's some really cool books from France and Spain about xeriscape. Like, yeah, it's a worldwide thing. In Australia, I just had an Australian friend visiting talking about low water landscapes. And everyone, like worldwide, the movement is away from amending with compost and organic material, and instead
Mhm.
amending with air, which is loosening. So, like loosening the soil also may not always be necessary. Like, if it used to be turf and it was turf for 50 years, the soil's probably fine and loose under it, and in fact, more nutritious than it needs to be. So we don't have to improve that soil at all. In fact, we might have to haul off the turf or flip the turf, and do nothing else. But in new builds and new constructions is where I see compaction. And with compaction, we have to loosen it. Loosening it is incorporating air into the soil and letting it have, crumbly structure so oxygen and water can get down. So soil prep is about loosening, if necessary at all, in the xeric world. That's what's
Mhm.
interesting to me. And as like you might have inferred that like native plants are adapted to the soil that exists here, they don't want compost. Like it's not for them. So I hope that helps somebody who's talking soil prep. Just loosening if it's compacted. And there's a handful of strategies for loosening, depending on how big the space is and what your means are. Um, Moving on to animals. So it sounds like a lot of like grazing and troublesome animals. So um, one interesting thing about, okay, I have a few feelings on that because I've had clients with like elk walking through the garden, and I thought it was cool until like elk didn't even have to eat the plant and just stepped on it and it was toast. Like, oh shoot, that wasn't fun. There's a lot of plants you just killed walking through. Anyway, I have a couple feelings on big animals is or nuisance animals, I guess. Is one, I think we need to acknowledge like when we're making a buffet or attracting them with something like, okay, you made a nice lawn, now everyone wants to eat it. We have to kind of acknowledge that and maybe meter how much we're actually unintentionally attracting them. Two, in designs, I tend to go one or the other with such animals. If there's a vegetable garden, it's exclude all of them. We're gonna bury a fence to keep the squirrels out. We're gonna have a tall fence to keep the deer out. Like total exclusion for vegetable garden. On the other side is like we're just gonna deal with them and plant things that they survive or don't kill. Because I feel like a lot of folks, the frustration, years of frustration is that middle zone because a big nature of grazing animals is that they change what they graze depending on their how desperate they are. Like a deer will not usually eat sagebrush. A deer usually goes for like willow bark or whatever until it's desperate, and a deer will then eat cactus and sagebrush and wacky things. And so then these surprises happen. That sort of when in the middle where we're kind of coping with them, maybe putting deterrents out or whatever. That tends to be where frustration happens, I think. So I try to make it like all or nothing. We're going to exclude all of them, or we're going to live with them and plant a garden that can tolerate them. And in the side of the garden that can tolerate them, that's where um, really spiny stuff. There's a lot of deer resistant things, rabbit. I don't know. I don't know about turkeys. I've actually never dealt with that. I'd be curious what that damage is, actually. Um, but a lot of those animals, anything that's really fuzzy and then really resinous, things that have strong smells. There are some really good resources buried online for like deer and rabbit resistant ones. My favorite resource is the High Country Gardens catalog, online or on paper. That is probably the most accurate deer and rabbit resistant listing that I have seen, and based on my experience with those plants. So I like that for that. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, awesome. Um, Let me know if there's any other ones in the Q&A that feel compelling for you, but I think we could also wrap it up here pretty shortly. Um,
There we go. Or where's Q&A? There we go. It wasn't letting me have it real quick. Buzz through. Let's see, there's a pine tree moment.
hmm,
Um, Pine trees and conifers are really competitive with their roots. There's this like old adage that like pine trees or conifers acidify the soil. It's not necessarily true. It's more that their roots are crazy competitive and they have, well, they just do things to keep other plants out. But there's a handful. Okay, bear grass again. Oh my God, great plant. Bear grass, manzanitas, and Oregon grape are all very like conifer tolerant things. Under a pine tree, you're going to have to water things extra to get them established because again of that's root competition. And I believe in doing deep waterings so that there's enough water for both your new plantings under the tree and the tree roots. In order to keep plants alive under there, you may have to start, irrigate more. But it tends to be these broadleaf evergreens that survive underneath of pine trees. And there's no accident that in nature, that's where we find a lot of those plants growing together. So, yeah.
my-
Yeah, same with that juniper bush question.
for sure.
Um, let's see here. I've never used Colorado marble for a crevice garden. I was supposed to build a crevice garden out of marble in Turkey, but COVID killed that weird small question. Some nice words about it. Let's see. Question about schools. How do they mean about a school? Um, Programs or schools offer garden design programs. God, that's a good question. I've um Depending on what you're looking for, my friend Kelly Norris in Iowa and Des Moines offers something he calls the uh, what does he call it? Shoot. Anyway, Kelly Norris does some great online classes that are like hardcore garden design. That's good stuff. I'm looking at doing some online classes too because suddenly this esoteric stuff that I figured out having started 10 years ago doing this is useful. A lot of people are using it, turf conversion, etc. Don't use landscape fabric. Super rarely they were asking. There's slowly becoming a movement away from landscape fabric. We've got addicted to this stuff. Don't get me started. But all horticulture people hate it. Uh,
Yeah.
but it takes some doing to avoid it. I want to say there was life before landscape fabric. We existed. Humanity existed. We built the Eiffel Tower without landscape fabric. Do it again.
I like
Um,
that too.
Shallow containers in full sun. I hate when I have a plant that dies just because I forgot to water it once. So I'm a big fan of cactus and succulents in containers. Containers get hot in Colorado and dry.
Mhm.
Sedums and rock gardens, there some sedums are like really xeric and some are not. I hate to say that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they really split. Some sedums are from mountaintops and yeah, it really depends on variety. Corrections. Thanks for spelling corrections. Cool. Yeah. Not normal for agaves to get brown and dried looking. Something happened. They were either not hardy enough, the agaves that got brown, or the situation was bad for them. Maybe they were too wet going into the winter. Brown and dried looking is probably that they just weren't winter hardy. Just guessing. That's not a good sign. Agave should stay blue and evergreen all year. Um, Crabgrass digging it out of the garden. Grass and crabgrass. Can't get rid of all my grass. I've got rid of a lot of it. Woof. When you have running grasses like that, I use competition clump grasses that are very competitive. Um, yeah, it's hard. Cool. That was good. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we've covered it most.
Yeah.
Depth of gravel,
Cool.
mulch. Is that like 3 inches? Is that what you tend to do?
Depends what you need it for. So in a
Okay.
garden where you want things to reseed and whatnot, thinner. So one
Okay.
to 3 inches for a garden, and
Okay.
then 4 inches and above for a landscape when you want to exclude new things coming up from seed.
Gotcha.
Someone asked about contractors. Now there are a bunch of small native landscape firms in Denver, and I would just say that like they're startups and they're small and they're young and they're like I don't know, small people we're limited and we're figuring it out. So, don't expect the capacity of like a giant landscape firm, but there are a bunch. There's like a dozen really competent, amazing native pollinator xeriscape people um, that are in the Denver area now, all doing yeah, contracting for that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
love that. Cool. I think we can go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Kenton. I always learn
Yeah.
so much from your presentations. I hope everyone on here, I think I saw the count at about 175 or so. So I might have a few more that I missed, but I'm sure they all learned as much as I did. I love what you said about like the genres of gardening. And I know like, especially in my world of like water conservation, it can get really kind of like righteous about like how we garden and there's like a right way. And I
Nice.
just really appreciate the like, yeah, also it's habitat for me and like allowing
Mhm.
space for people to just like grow fun plants because it's fun to grow plants that you want to look at. So I
Yeah.
just like really appreciate that attitude.
Good. Yeah,
So
there
yeah.
is a kind of a school of thought. Like, I think we all can get righteous. Like, I believe there's a big disconnect between gardening and landscaping because I think those are two different worlds. Like,
Yeah.
don't fight. This is baseball and basketball, man. Like, don't fight. But yeah, righteous is a good word. There is a school, there's this little school of garden design that I'm very much part of, which is if we can appeal to the human animal, it is way more apt that, like, if you can sell a garden that the human animal works and then work in all the pollinator habitat water saving. Do you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
has to serve us first, then
Mhm.
that really empowers those other missions we can have. Like, and
For
I've
sure.
seen it. Like I'm lucky enough that I can make a living doing that now. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like that point. It's
Yeah.
you gotta if we make it for people, then people will buy it and the good work you guys do up there is behind that because you know help people and then we can help everybody else. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much.